So can you plead stupid in a case? My client would like to plead stupid. He's just an idiot, and he's...
Good evening, and welcome to the Church of Awesome.
The church to end all churches.
I will be conducting today. I am Cardinal Imam Spencer, son of Hagar.
Peace be upon him.
Presiding today will be Demi-Pope Chris. We also have the Archangel Michael.
Yeah.
And Bill. Today we will be discussing standards of proof. And our first speaker, the Archangel Michael. Hear him!
Today we will be talking about standards of proof. In legal terminology, a standard of proof is defined as the amount of evidence that a prosecutor must present in trial in order to win. In the United States courts of law, we use what is called an adversarial system. In the one corner you have an accuser, called either a prosecutor or a plaintiff. And in the other corner you have a defendant. The accuser must provide the necessary evidence to satisfy the standard of proof. The requirements to prove a defendant's guilt differs according to the type of trial. The two common standards of proof are 1. Preponderance of the evidence, and 2. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's talk criminal law. When a crime is committed, it is considered to be a wrong against the state. If you are arrested for a crime, it is because the police, who are agents of the state, reasonably believe that you committed a wrong against the people, and the district attorney will file charges against you. When you are at trial, the prosecution has what is called the burden of proof. This means that it is the responsibility of the prosecutor to demonstrate the guilt of the accused person. In a proper court of law, the evidence will be presented, and the trier of fact, usually a jury of your peers, will decide if the evidence is strong enough to convict you. The standard of proof for a criminal trial is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. For a criminal defendant to be convicted of a crime, the prosecutor must prove his case to the point that the jurors have no reasonable doubts in their mind that the defendant did whatever he is charged with having done. This is often quantified as a 90% certainty. Let's talk civil law. Civil trials are for disputes between private parties. A wrong against the state is a crime, and a wrong against another person is called a tort. In this scenario, one private person is claiming that he was wronged by another private person. When differences between private parties cannot be settled by talking it out or by mediation, the case can go to court. In this case, you have just a judge hearing it, and he is a trier of fact instead of a jury. The accuser in this kind of trial is a private person, and he is the one that carries the burden of proof. It is his responsibility to demonstrate the validity of his claim. Through the evidence he presents, he will need to convince the judge that it is more likely than not that his claim is true. This is proof through the preponderance of the evidence. This is usually thought to be a 51% likelihood that the claim is true. Since nobody's life or freedom is at stake in a civil trial, it is not as important to remove all reasonable doubt. So to put it simply, to convict someone of a crime or a tort, the evidence against him must satisfy at least the minimum required standards of proof. Otherwise, he is being denied due process, and his constitutional rights are being violated.
So the commonly used beyond a shadow of a doubt is on an actual legal term.
No, that's kind of one of those made up for TV drama things.
Perry Mason's a lying sack of shit.
Yeah, it sounds like something he'd say.
I always like the term beyond a reasonable doubt, though, because it's like, yeah, it's possible that he didn't do it, but it would have been all these really unlikely circumstances and all.
Yeah, what's really fun is when you
aligned with Jupiter and
yeah,
that caused some swamp gas to reflect on.
I've seen a lot of court cases in my time, and I love watching either the judge or the prosecuting attorney explain to the jury what beyond a reasonable doubt means. And one of my favorite examples was, he said, like, okay, well, if you get your kid and you find that cookies have been stolen from the cookie jar, now the more reasonable thing is that the kid went and he took it. You know, he had access, and kids like cookies. What's not likely is that an alien came down and did it. And it's like, okay, the more reasonable thing is that, you know, someone did it rather than some extraordinary example for which there's absolutely no proof whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So the ghost's defense doesn't really work that well in court.
Not so much.
I didn't kill him. It was a ghost.
That is correct.
It's like I'm using the Scooby-Doo defense.
And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids. The way it was explained to me when I was... All those times I've been kicked off juries for being too intelligent or whatever. The judges have always explained to me that you can you can doubt it, but if the doubt's not based in reason, then you wouldn't consider that.
It's like if you have an emotional kind of thing, it's like, I don't feel like... I mean, the evidence points to it, but he
I
looks
just-
like such a nice guy. Yeah.
I just, I don't think he did it, but I don't really have any reason for that.
I can't put my finger on it,
Yeah.
and it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Intuition
actually
or something.
there's a phrase if you talk about Fourth Amendment and probable cause. It's reasonable, articulable suspicion that an officer has to have before he can like really search you or really act upon anything. Because anything that an officer is going to have to do, he will have to explain.
You see, he was black, and so...
Yeah, and the key word is articulable. Say, well, he was, he was driving erratically. It doesn't really mean anything. It's like, okay, if he was driving not in a straight line and changing lanes, that signaling a lot and not going in straight lines and at different velocities, you have to be able to actually articulate why. That was always one of my favorite words.
But driving erratically, I mean, I heard that used all the time.
Well, it's kind of like the word ransack. My law teacher always used to say that. It's like, I fucking hate that word. It's like, he ransacked it. That doesn't mean anything. Like, did he turn over stuff? Did he go through? It's like, it's so vague and non-descriptive. Like,
It's
anything.
emotionally charged.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, and it's worthless when you're writing a report. But yeah, you do hear it, driving erratically. It's kind of one of those cut buzzwords that I guess is catching on or maybe used more, but generally and officially, it's you're supposed
But it's
to
not
use,
something you're supposed to do. They
Use
need to be able to
words.
cover. Yeah.
These big boy words.
Yeah.
He was driving like a guilty person would drive.
Yes.
That's right. Especially like a guilty person. The word reasonable is used a lot in law. Like they have the reasonable person standard. Back to the definition of probable cause is a set of circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has occurred or is occurring and that person is somehow responsible. And it's always reasonable person. What would a reasonable person? Because I guess that's the only way they can think to eliminate crazies. Like
It's like, what would an escaped mental patient think?
exactly. So yeah, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And
So the dude with a tinfoil on his head doesn't count.
I mean, because the study of law is,
He's stealing my brainwaves.
it's inherently
Well, you're under arrest.
bogged down in semantics. And what does reasonable mean? It depends on what the definition of the word is.
Yeah.
So I talked about trier of fact and trier of law, in case that wasn't clear. You have the trier of law is the judge. He's the one that's kind of the referee of the courtroom to make sure all of the processes are going through as they're supposed to.
Let me see if I can get. So, trier of law is that, you've got just according to what is written down, that the case that's that they're attempting to make is well established, and that the facts that are being presented are in accordance with what they're trying to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And then trier of fact is trying to establish the facts of the case against the established standards of the law.
Very good. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's another concept, stare decisis, which means standing by a decision. It's basically the importance of case precedent.
Yeah.
Is another important thing. And the judge can do a lot of things that I think people don't realize. Like, sometimes you hear, like, can I have a motion for a summary judgment, where a judge can dismiss a case with prejudice and dismiss a case without prejudice. Basically, I'm shutting this case down and I'm ruling on it saying guilty or not guilty, and then without prejudice is basically kind of like declaring a mistrial. Also,
Wait. So he can just say, "Yeah, I'm sick of this case. He's definitely guilty. Let's move on with it."
uh-huh.
Doesn't that kind of circumvent the whole jury trial thing?
Well, it's something that's never done because the
Makes you
political.
look bad, basically.
Yeah, it's political.
I mean, you look like a
implication.
despot if you're doing that.
You still can have a bench trial this day and age where you say, look, and that's almost what I do, because I love judges. I've spent a lot of time with judges, and they're just the coolest
I would
people
trust
ever.
the judge over a group of
Yeah.
people who couldn't get out of jury duty.
Exactly. So you can still do that. They used to do it back in the day because it was just easier, and you didn't have to bring people off the streets to do it. Just have a judge here. But then judges were easily bribed, and then it kind of screwed up. That's why they kind of invented the whole jury trial system. Now we're back at the point where I'd kind of probably prefer a bench trial personally, but
So you can just You just demand it at the beginning.
Yeah, that's one of your pretrial motions to just say I'd like to petition.
Is that one of the things they use for like a bargaining chip? Because is one known to be desirable? So they can feel like, hey, we'll only charge you with this, but you have to do a jury trial.
I think so few people ever do it, and I think very few people actually like really know about it. It's not a common thing at all. And I'm guessing if most people, the average person, heard you can have a trial just by a judge, their first reaction is going to be,
no thanks.
Yeah, they'll go, yeah, probably. My future is based on the thoughts of one man. He could easily be swayed or bribed, something like that. Like, never mind the fact that judges have been lawyers forever, and like they know the system really well, and they're usually just the coolest guys. That's
Well, but on a jury trial, you only have to have one person think you're innocent. Really,
it depends on the kind of trial. Some require unanimous verdicts, some don't.
Really, what kinds don't require?
Civil trials.
Well, civil trials don't have juries.
Yeah.
All right.
Generally speaking, in a civil trial, the judge is both the trier of fact and the trier of law. Basically, it's like going to an adult when kids can't solve their problems. They go to Judge Judy and say, "Look, he owed me this much in rent and he didn't pay, and then I did this in retribution." And so they basically talk it out, and then the judge say, "Look, plaintiff, you're an asswipe. You owe him $300. Done." You ever watch Judge Judy? She's awesome. She does that, and she's very entertaining while she does it. She's badass.
And most judges I've seen are pretty funny. I think you have to have a sense of humor to.
You absolutely do, because they've seen this so many times. They know exactly what's going to happen, and so they have to have a sense of humor. And they like when you get them back into their office, they just start making fun of everybody. It's so great. Like, what's up with that thing? Like, I have my own theories on her. So much fun. But yeah, like certain in like a capital case, if executions involved, yeah, everyone's got to agree on that. And I think just the great majority of criminal trials are unanimous verdict, and I believe it's also varied by the state. Some states it's like 9 out of 12 and all that. So yeah, so it's not necessarily has to be unanimous verdict to convict someone.
Interesting. But it's probably easier to sow seeds of doubt into, like, if you are guilty and you want to get away with it, it's probably easier to sow seeds of doubt in a jury. You'd only want to pick the judge if you were actually innocent, right?
I suppose so. Yeah, actually, I never really thought about it.
Because you're never gonna pull one over on a judge. Like
That's a good point. Yeah, if I was actually, yeah, that's true. I'd almost be tempted to say to the judge, "Look, I trust your intelligence a lot more than those bozos." So how does this relate to religion, you ask? How does this relate to religion, you didn't ask? There is something that we are entitled to if we are accused, and that is called due process. It is basically proper procedure and the observance of all the laws in relation to the trial process. Like, for example, in America we have a right to a speedy public trial, we have a right to face our accuser directly, we have a right to counsel, and we have the right to be informed of the nature of the crimes against us, and so on and so forth. We don't get any of that in God's terms. Like, one of the classic idioms is ignorance of the law is no excuse, and that's why we should read our Bible, I guess, and we should know the gospel backwards and forwards so that we know every moment that we're against the exact will of God, whatever that is.
Well, the crux of it is this standards of proof. You don't have the 90% or 51%. It's all 100% because you're talking about an omniscient being that knows everything. So it's 100% all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're kind of either innocent or you're not. And which kind of makes it extra amusing to me when you have these church councils, these basically kangaroo courts that they set up to determine whether or not you're guilty, even though I've never heard of one ever involving evidence. You'll have witnesses testify, and I think in some churches you have to have a minimum of 2 witnesses because somehow that's a magic number.
I think that's in the Bible, actually. I think
church courts?
No, I think the whole having witnesses against you. It's like if I think I remember reading that somewhere in the Bible where it's like if a man has stolen a cow and 2 men testify against him, then he should be something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in apocalyptic literature, 2 is the number of witnesses, and that's where you get the 2 prophets that get killed and resurrected in Israel from Book of Revelation.
Yeah, but that's like different kind of witnesses. Know what I mean? Like in the Bible, I think there's actually, I mean, there is law, and there's lots of it.
Oh yeah, Leviticus
and
means
Deuteronomy.
law, right?
But I think that's in there. The whole concept of witnesses testifying against.
Witness testimony is a form of evidence that is admitted into trial, assuming that it's not hearsay. Now, hearsay is basically a third-party statement, something that's not really verifiable, like words of a prophet, for example.
I heard him say that.
It's like, well, he went into the room, and when he came out...
He drew on the rocks with his fingers, and he said... But, yeah, one of the things that really bothered me, forgive the indulgence into Mormonism, but the Nauvoo Expositor, was written by these members of the Mormon Church who had felt that the prophet Joseph Smith had gone astray, and one of the complaints they made in that the Nauvoo Expositor was that they were basically put on trial. They said your trial date is this day of the week, and you have a week to put together all the witnesses for your defense and all your stuff. And they found out later through one of the prophet's secretaries saying, "Oh yeah, we already held it like 2 days ago, and we excommunicated you. We convicted you."
It's like, we already had the basketball game. We didn't schedule you to show up, so we just stood there and shot into your basket, and you lost the game.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. In addition to right to face your accuser, how about knowing when your actual court date is? I mean, it's different because when you get into ecclesiastical courts and real courts, because the state has what's called policing powers, and they have the right to lay charges against you. Now, if you're talking,
Well, in a religion, they would have the right to lay charges against you spiritually. If you're part of that congregation, then you kind of give them that right, I would think. In the matter of all things froofy.
It's a legal term, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you have violated Smurf laws.
Yeah, law and religion are kind of strange because they're kind of totally incompatible. Because it's the opposite. They like to have the illusion, just like they like to have the illusion of science. They like to have the illusion of law, but they are anathema to both of them. And so they just kind of put on this charade of these things.
Because I would love to just say, how can you make peace with this, like in your conscience? Because even the most basic due process rights are denied me. It's what is your prima facie evidence? What is it you're actually using, tangible something to convict me of this crime? If I'm being accused of adultery, for example, I mean, it's a little messy, the whole thing of gathering evidence, even for police, especially for police. But it's like, if you're just
Did you find my DNA at the scene?
Yeah, yeah, I would love to see your church science lab. CSI, church scene investigation.
Is adultery actually illegal? Legally speaking?
I don't think so.
I'm assuming it's been purged from all the states. It's a used to be thing. But adultery now is more like nullifying property rights and divorce case kind of stuff. That's where I've seen it more, where it's like you don't get half the stuff because you weren't faithful. Like, you have to live up to the contract, and depending on prenuptial agreements, if any.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, if it's part of the contract, then you have to establish it to enforce the contract.
That's what I thought.
Like, I mean, if I was to get excommunicated for apostasy, well, they could pull out any one of our podcasts or interviews, or because I post the stuff, my indictments of religion, and they can feel free to look. It's out there because I want people to see it. So,
if they send you like a church summons, you send them a summons to, like, you need to come to my court to defend yourself against these.
Yeah, here is a true bill for your.
Yeah, it's like, I'll show up to yours if you show up to mine. Yeah.
I'll show me. Oh, yeah.
That'd be quite fun.
I mean, the person being there is really incidental. They just want to
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, they've already established the fact in their minds before you've walked in the door that you're evil, and they just want to, collectively berate you.
This comes down to like the presumption of innocence, right? Like the fact that they're in U.S. court of law, the fact that they're holding the trial means nothing. You're not guilty of anything just because they brought charges up. But in a church court, the only reason they're bringing charges up is because you're guilty.
Well, yeah, because their standard of proof is 100%, and they get to decide what evidence is valid.
Well, they're the ones that decide what
Exactly.
the 100% is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They said, like, we asked God, and he said, and you're like, well, that's really strong evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, that is something that is widely misunderstood. Like, well, he was arrested. He must be guilty. No, he could have been in the wrong place, the wrong time. As one of my teachers said, the wrong color at the wrong time.
Oh yeah, that happens a lot.
Yes, one of my criminal justice professors actually said that. I said, I can't repeat most of what they said in that class.
Well, I mean, it's very true. To say anything else is disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, just because the district attorney has filed charges against you means, like I said in the book report section, it's probable cause had been satisfied that the agent of the state reasonably believed that a crime had occurred and that you were somehow responsible. It's a set of circumstances that convinces a reasonable person to believe that this happened and you're responsible.
But it doesn't prove that it actually happened, just that it was reasonable to assume that it may have happened.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't mean... it's... even if, like, the cop saw you do it, you still get to go to trial because the cop doesn't decide your fate. He's just an agent of the state. Which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and he could have not seen what he thought he saw.
Right.
He could be making assumptions. Everyone is... I mean, that's why we use, prima facie evidence instead of just witness testimony. Witness testimony is not historically all that reliable.
Yeah.
In
Unfortunately...
fact, it's historically quite unreliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been proven to be really, really unreliable, yet it still carries a lot of weight. I mean, it certainly carries a lot of weight with the average person because that's how they mostly frame their life.
Well, that's just generally how we
reality.
establish fact. Yeah, that's kind of how we've always done it. It's just like, oh yeah, I did this and then this. So pretty cut and dry to me. Yeah. But
Yeah.
Oh,
And
he
yet,
saw that and then that. Okay. Yeah.
Even our own memories are so ridiculously flawed. It's kind of scary, really.
Yeah, it's like if you've ever remembered something and then seen a video of that same event, and you're like, "Oh man, that was nothing like I remembered it." Or,
Yeah.
Or watching cartoons you watch as a kid now.
Oh, yeah. It's like, "Oh, these were so funny." No, they're not funny at all.
The animation is horrible. I remember, it was such good animation. It was really smooth. No, that was Scooby-Doo animation.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Zoinks!
Zoinks indeed, old chap. And what other rights of the accused? The rights of the accused. I was pulling basically from the Sixth Amendment. There's Fifth Amendment, the right of the accuser to refuse to testify against himself. You can't compel someone to testify against themselves. And in a church court, it's kind of hard to say because if you're buying into the theology, then you say, well, I have to admit my sins in order to have them forgiven, right? That's part of it, confessing and forsaking your sins. Obviously, in a court of law, you don't have to do that.
Well, and that one always struck me as kind of strange anyway, because like I can't compel you to tell the truth about what you did. It's just like you can't really compel anyone to tell the truth ever. I mean, even under torture, people can still lie.
Right.
So it's like it's just really just writing that down and making it. It's like we acknowledge that people can't be forced to testify against themselves. Yeah, it's more of an acknowledgement than anything else, I think.
Yeah, I would love to get someone who's actually participated in a church court. That'd be so cool to talk to them. Yeah, I don't know what more I can do to really piss off the church to get them to indict me. I mean, I suppose I can go and protest in front of the temple or whatever, but I have to go on to like some probably like national broadcast and really.
I think they're.
I mean, we're small potatoes.
I mean, they're smarter than that. They're only going to do it if it suits their purposes. Because if you bring up somebody who's already has some sort of a platform, and then you give them this experience, all you're doing is fueling the fire. It's like the Barbra Streisand problem, where she didn't want people taking pictures of her house, and she kind of publicized that. And so what everyone did was everyone did it a lot more, and they were posting on the internet like pictures of her house or something like that. So it's just the backlash that you get, the Streisand effect. It's called.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's why like if you
Streisand effect.
yeah, it's if you're trying to stop something, and when people find out you're trying to stop something, that makes them do it more. You know.
And now it's time to commune with the spirits. I'll start. Today I'm drinking the Balvenie Doublewood, aged 12 years. Quite tasty.
And I'm communing with the spirit of Cragganmore 12-year-old. So it's a great scotch. It's got a really complex aroma, and it is delicious. I highly recommend it.
Great scotch.
Today I'm communing with the spirit of ice water and a power bar because I just woke up and didn't feel like getting wasted today.
Pussy.
Yet.
The day is still young. I mean, I've heard accounts of like Jehovah's Witnesses courts, and they sounded pretty similar to Mormon disciplinary courts, where it's basically the men that are in charge, of course, have their way because they're usually just a bunch of old guys who are obviously conservative because they're old, and
Yeah.
they run the show, and it's a boys' club, and person stands in front of them, and they may or may not be able to have a witness present, but then they'll just start
Berating them.
pretty much time what pieces of shit they are, and it's like I believe they called them like a court of love in the LDS church. So like, you know, the goal is to excommunicate them in a way that they'll want to come back, like come back to the fold, because you've brainwashed these people to think that this is where they're supposed to be, and if they get kicked out,
Well, that's the only hope.
I would love to take part in a council now, because I would openly mock them and what a horrible justice system they have.
Yeah, I don't think that would sink in, though.
No.
They just go like this guy spouting off all this law mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, and all of his logic. Damn you and your logic. But I mean, I can imagine like 2 or 3 years ago, if I got to take one before one of those things, I'd have been devastated. You know, if I had been excommunicated, because it's very much your salvation is dependent upon.
It's defending your life, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, and historically you've had those, like the Catholic Church, they would excommunicate people, and you're just like, that was it for you, and it's like, you know, they controlled all of Europe basically, and they said like, you know, you're cast out, you are nothing.
Well, while we're talking about proof, one of my favorite sayings is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's a Sagan quote, right?
I think that was Sagan quoting someone else, but but it's basically just it kind of goes back to Occam's razor, that a lot of times people misunderstand it as being that little extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but it's really more along the lines of if there's an explanation, like if there's multiple explanations, we should choose the one that has the fewest new assumptions. Right, so we should just parse it down to stuff that mostly we understand and know. And if we're making assumptions, we have to acknowledge that. If we're making a lot of assumptions, then we're not likely to be right. That's kind of what it is, parsed down to its most basic.
But if we remove the impossible, whatever's left, however unlikely, must be the right answer. That's Mr. Spock. I do like it. That's an interesting definition, that the fewest new assumptions. That's pretty cool. Yeah, the new assumptions is stuff that we haven't thought of before, and you go, let's just say, for the sake of argument, this. And the more of those you put on, the more problematic your argument's probably going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just we always have to be aware of the assumptions that we make when we're stating things. And a lot of times, anti-religionists get accused of that. It's like, you're making all these assumptions, and it's just like, yes, I realize that, but at least my assumptions are somewhat tested, or at least testable.
Yeah, grounded in reality.
Based on some sort of logic. as opposed to something written in some book.
Another thing I want to talk about was bills of attainder and ex post facto laws. I'll start with the bill of attainder. That's basically, actually, the ex post facto one's easy because it just says you can't make you can't punish someone for something that wasn't illegal at the time that they did it.
It's basically making a law to make whatever someone did illegal.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's obviously a denial of due process.
Yeah.
Say, I don't like this thing that you did. Oh, it's illegal, and now you're punished for it. You
Yeah.
know, like.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense, but then there's part of you that wants to punish someone when they did something that wasn't illegal but was obviously wrong, like a lot of this the financial markets stuff that people were doing, which was obviously wrong, and they knew it, but it wasn't explicitly illegal, and it's like we would love to punish those people, but that just opens the door to something. That
Instead, we just threw them a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So much better.
Yeah.
You got to remember that the justice system obviously isn't perfect, and kind of the way that it's set up is almost assuming that they'll screw up again. It's almost like they assume that that people are criminal types. Some are criminal types that they may not get caught the first time they commit a crime, but they will keep committing crimes until they get caught because their mentality is, I'm above the law, or I'm so clever that I'll never get caught, and then they will get caught, and that's when they get nailed. So unfortunately, sometimes a bunch of crimes happen before you finally get the guy.
Well, and I think generally our system here is set up so that if there's going to be an error made, it's going to err on maintaining somebody's freedom.
Yeah.
Yes, they would much rather.
They're erring on the side of
yeah.
not imprisoning the innocent, but letting the guilty go free.
Yeah, the old saying was, I would rather let 100 guilty people go free than to condemn an innocent man.
Yeah.
I forget who said that. but
Innocent woman, whatever.
The law doesn't apply to women.
The problem is that's the theory, but in practice, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, we're imprisoning plenty of innocent people. Just they're poor, and so they don't count.
It's more of a series of nitpicky laws that are just you're building this case against someone with a bunch of tiny little charges. It's almost like the death by 1,000 cuts kind of a thing. Like really insignificant non-violent drug offenses is the main reason why. And the other thing is the abuse of things like the 3 strikes law, where they instead of having 3 felonies and you get life without parole or whatever, life in prison, they're basically doing it if you have 1 or 2 felonies and then any other offense and you're out. That's what they're doing in practice, and it's an abuse of the law. It's like charging a misdemeanor as a felony is kind of bullshit. It's kind of unjust, but it's what they're doing. It's also reminds me of a similar injustice that we're charging so many juveniles as adults, which really isn't fair. I mean, like, the way we treat minors in this country is a little bit maddening, because you have the legal term infancy is when you're not an adult, and according to the law, you're not mentally capable of giving consent, and you can't make contracts, and can't be fully responsible for what you're doing. That's why kids don't go to jail, kind of a thing. But to charge them as if they're fully functioning adults, pretty dishonest, pretty awful. But
But there has to be a bar or something that someone does that's so awful.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got, like, if it's what's called 707B offense, like a minor like commits murder or arson or something like that, then yeah, if he's more than 14, he's likely going to be charged as an adult. But
you're saying like things that are less significant.
Right, there's no magical line where you go, all of a sudden I'm smart or I'm fully capable. I mean, you can explain simple concepts or even complex concepts to a 15-year-old, to some 15-year-olds, and not be able to explain them to 27-year-olds. But anyway, why was I talking about that?
So can you plead stupid in a case?
Like,
My client would like to plead stupid.
Yeah.
He's just an idiot.
He'd like to plead juvenile, yeah.
Yeah. We were saying about ex post facto laws is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and funny when you talk about the financial guys, which leads me into the Bill of Attainder. The Bill of Attainder is something that is done to punish someone, to dole out punishment without an actual trial or without due process.
Well, that's like we can't imprison you because we don't have enough to convict you, but we know you did it, so we're gonna like make your life miserable, basically. Right?
Or it's more like,
Well, that's the concept, right? Because, I mean, that happens a lot.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't what I had in mind, but yeah, I guess a little, you have, the financial one is my favorite example, because the Constitution says specifically that you shouldn't have ex post facto laws or bill of attainder. So what they did in, what Congress did in, I think it was 2010, to punish the greedy bankers who were instrumental in the global financial meltdown, they basically like taxed heavily or like confiscated their golden parachute kind of a thing like that. This is basically, we make a law and we get your money. You don't get, I mean, I understand, don't want to reward them for bad behavior, but that is something that happened in the past that wasn't legal at the time they did it, and they get punished and fined without a trial. So literally, it is an ex post facto bill of attainder. It's what they did.
Well, I think the way they justified it was that because it was only the banks that received money from the bailout, right? So that was part of the condition of the bailout.
Yeah, I mean, if they're a breaching contract, then yeah, all bets are off. But
yeah, but I mean that I think they said that these received, and the things that they didn't put that stipulation when they did the bailout, but they said they basically gave them the bailout and then they used the bailout to pay for bonuses, and
yeah,
and they're like, hey, that's not what we gave it to you for, and I think that's what the reasoning was. It doesn't defend their actions, but
yeah,
makes them understandable.
Yeah, I would love for you to explain to me why bonuses are a good thing. I had a friend who explained to me who is a CPA, and he was telling me that basically the only way to motivate different people and different profit centers is to have extra bonuses as an incentive. And but they already get paid a lot of money, and I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's
included
in a capitalist system.
I don't get it.
So the capitalist system is and part of it is just how the different things are taxed: salary versus bonuses, lump sums versus paying out over a long period of time. But the whole bonus thing is about you want to attract the best, and the best are going to cost more. So it's a supply and demand thing. That you say there's a certain supply of really good managers, really good CEOs, something like that. So we want to attract those, so we'll pay them more. And that's basically how it is. But the thing is that what qualifies someone as a good businessman. There's a larger supply than I think they realize. So yeah, they're paying these people just ridiculous sums of money when they could get someone who could do the same job or better for significantly less. But it's also appearances that you want to appear to have a better CEO. So, our CEO gets paid this much, so he must be really good. Therefore, our company must be really good.
But, I was just thinking, for ex post facto, you've got people who get converted to a church. They kind of have to suffer or admit or confess their sins from their previous life when they didn't have the gospel enlightenment. That's actually it's kind of both ex post facto and bill of attainder. They have to go through the punishment of confessing to a bishop all the things they did, but it's but they didn't know any better.
Well, the thing is that there's not really any punishment, because whether you're no matter what, your crimes could be very few or very many, as long as they don't reach a criminal level.
Oh yeah, if for example, Mormon baptism question is if you ever had an abortion. If you had an abortion 10 years, 20 years before getting converted to Mormonism, you may not be able to get baptized. You may be kept from getting baptized, and I've seen that firsthand. So that's you can't join the church and be saved because of a sin that you committed decades ago before the law was given to you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I invite you to bring up the God is just argument.
And now, our fatwas of the week. Today, I'm going to declare jihad on anorexic bitches. I don't mean people that are actually anorexic, but more on society's insistence on girls being so sickly skinny that they have no tits or ass left. There's something wrong with that, okay, girls? You're supposed to have curves. That's what we like. Some of these guys won't admit it. They think, oh, no, she's got to be so thin, I'm going to split her like wet pine or whatever. But the truth is
Skeletor.
a woman needs shape, I don't have a problem with being healthy and being not overweight, but it seems like today our society is so pushing towards women being under a healthy weight. And it really bothers me.
I concur.
And that actually reminds me of in Family Guy, when Peter starts his fat people's club, a sign on the outside said "No fat chicks." Like that, it's such a great marker. It shows how much the society hates. Even fat people don't want fat chicks in their club. Now, I don't want to declare a fatwa on Family Guy itself, but a particular episode that came up recently because I thought it was so offensive. Now, sometimes, yes, you have to be offensive. You have to cross the line so that we all know where it is to kind of remind us and bring attention to inconsistencies in our ways of thinking. But there was an episode that occurred recently. It was kind of like an homage to Freaky Friday or something like that, where the kids and the adults are changing roles. And I believe the story opens with Peter winning some kind of dirt bike, and then Chris and Meg ride it and they crash it. So they're sitting on the couch in the living room and the adults are yelling at the kids. The kids say, "Hey, well, it's not even so hard to be you. You know, you just get to make up rules and not have to follow them yourself," because Peter's always doing retarded shit and has a pretty much consequence-free. And so Peter said, well, when you make the money and you bring home the bacon, you get to make the rules. And then they decide, let's teach the kids a lesson and show them how hard it is to be an adult. And so the kids and the adults switch places. And so you have Lois going to high school, which is pretty funny because she said, "Girls I don't even know made me cry," and so there's really innocuous comments, and she goes in the bathroom and starts crying and stuff like that. That was amusing. And with Meg, she basically takes on the mother role, and they come home like, "Oh, I can't wait to see what horrible cooking she does for dinner," and then she brings out this really nice, well organized. It's like, I had all day to do this, and what about the housework? I did finish that in like 45 minutes. It's a limited amount of space. I did, and Peter goes to school, and he's a stupid high schooler, so that wasn't very interesting. But Chris takes over Peter's job, and because he's not mentally retarded, does a way better job and gets actually promoted and stuff like that. So basically, Chris becomes the head of the household, and so he starts making rules and stuff like that. And what I found really offensive about it is that it showed that adult life was so much easier than the kid's life. Now, at the end of the episode, Chris basically gets overworked because of cutbacks. He has to take on more responsibilities, so he's doing paperwork till midnight and all that stuff. He does end up having a heart attack. So they do kind of do that, but they never really address the mother head of the household issue. They just sort of dismiss it. And what I found really annoying about it is that it completely disregards the fact that when you're a middle-aged parent, your kids have already gone through the diapers and school, and they're more or less self-sufficient. They've kind of earned that after a decade or two of incredible sacrifice and having to make things work. And then when the kids are grown up, you do have a little more time. You get to relax a little and catch up on your reading and stuff like that. But it felt to me, because I'm not even a parent, but I found that so offensive, saying like, yeah, adult life is so much easier than a kid's life. Now, I love being an adult way more than I ever liked being a kid, but it seemed so narrow-minded and wrong to me. So that episode, I don't want to say it's not canon, but it's not canon.
Oh, there's a whole lot of Family Guy that's not canon to me.
Yeah, it stopped being funny. It stopped being consistently funny when they brought it back the last time.
Yeah. Season 4 was when you're like, hey, wait, now there are not funny episodes.
Yeah, that's funny because the first 3 seasons, I mean, they're all masterpieces. Mm-hmm. And they've started recycling ideas like, the episode called Lethal Weapons where Lois becomes like a karate fighter and stuff like that. And it goes to the whole Peter being emasculated by a woman who can kick his ass kind of a thing. And then they did like that exact same story, but with Lois boxing. And it was weird because it was as if that first episode never happened. So all the same exact themes are brought up and almost the same dialogue is brought up. Because sometimes you make me feel so imprisoned and not ladylike and so subservient to you. Like, we've already addressed this in season 1, I think like episode 4.
Yeah.
So it's...
karate's so much cooler than boxing. Come on.
Absolutely.
So my jihad is on traffic circles, aka roundabouts. Now, we came over to this country from Britain to get away from shit like this. We don't know how traffic circles work, and so they don't. So there's one pretty close to here where they have aligned everything to make it the most disastrous traffic area that you could possibly imagine. So first of all, a traffic circle or roundabout, you're supposed to just yield to the circle and then you cut into it when you can. But apparently people don't know how to yield. They just go in and they try and, just try and cut into the circle and everyone else has to stop. Slows down the circle, which makes it kind of not work. Now, to compound this, there are crosswalks on each of the 4 roads leading into this traffic circle. So that means if anyone crosses the street, the entire traffic circle stops. Now, that kind of is retarded, right? It's retarded.
To a high degree, yes. That is a maximum retardation.
Now, and as if that wasn't enough, they have parking all the way around the roundabout, which means that at somewhat regular intervals, you've got someone backing into the traffic circle, which will also bring the entire traffic circle to a total standstill. And every time we're driving around that area, we have to go way out of our way to just cut around the traffic circle because traffic is backed up on all 4 streets for blocks in every direction. So it's, traffic circles are supposed to be, more efficient. You don't have to stop and go. It can just be fluid, but that is not how it's working there. And I've never seen a traffic circle in the United States that actually worked well the way that it was supposed to.
Yeah, I've seen it maybe flow okay once or twice, but only with very little traffic because...
That's the only way that it can work, is if you're the only fucking car there.
Yeah, because people can't drive anyway here, and if things like rain really throw them off. But as bad as that is, I can't think of anything more unsafe and retarded than the lanes that are sometimes a park there and sometimes a not park there. That is the worst possible idea that you can do, because you'll never know you're driving down a road and there's a fucking parked car right in the middle of the goddamn road.
Well, at least you can kind of understand why that has to happen. Because there's not enough parking. We got to find parking somewhere.
There's no set of circumstances that justifies that in my mind.
The thing is that you don't have a really easy alternative to a traffic circle. There's a very easy alternative, and it's smaller, it's safer, and it's much more efficient.
Yeah,
it's what we do everywhere else.
Yeah.
That's my fatwa of the week.
Excellent. Peace be upon you.
We would like to thank you for joining us this week. We'd like to leave you with the gift of tongues.
Đi đường đất đỏ, đường đao đái đó, đái đầy đường đi. Đi đường đất đỏ, đường đao đái đó, đái đầy đường đi.
I'm gonna split her like wet pine or whatever, but
It's dry sand effect.
there's something wrong with that, okay, girls?
I can't put my finger on it, and it's bullshit.
He was driving like a guilty person would drive.
The comments made by the hosts and other participants are the opinions of the individuals and not those of any corporate entity. All data and information provided in this program is for informational purposes only. The Church of Awesome makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, currentness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. If you like what you've heard in today's sermon, come visit us at churchofawesome.com or follow us on Twitter at COA Podcast.